100,000 years ago, at least 6 different kinds of human walked the earth, and ours. Homo sapiens was nothing special, a frightened animal stuck in the middle of the food chain, hiding from lions, cracking open the bones other predators left behind. Nobody watching would have bet on us. Today, that same animal splits atoms, edits genes, and reaches for the powers of a god. So what happened? Not bigger muscles, not even a bigger brain. The Neanderthals had us beat there. It came down to one strange trick no other creature on Earth can do. We learned to believe in things that aren't real, and to make millions of strangers believe them too. That single trick built money, gods, nations, everything you call civilization. It made us masters of the planet, and it may be about to end us. Start with just how unremarkable we were. For millions of years, our ancestors were ordinary apes, one twig on a crowded family tree. Homo erectus, the tiny hobbit humans of the island of Flores, and the Neanderthals, stronger than us, built for the cold, with brains as large as our own, or larger. We picture evolution as a ladder, climbing straight up to us. It wasn't. It was a bush. Many kinds of human alive at the same time, and sapiens just one of them. Worse, for most of that time, humans sat squarely in the middle of the food chain. We hunted small game and scavenged the leftovers of real predators. We were the ones who flinched at every shadow. So here's the puzzle. How did the anxious middle child of the animal kingdom end up running the whole house? The answer begins around 70,000 years ago, with a change so quiet it left almost no trace, except in the way we spoke. Plenty of animals communicate. A monkey can screech, careful, a lion. But only sapiens could say something no monkey ever could. The lion is the guardian spirit of our tribe. A lion that isn't there. A claim you cannot see, or touch, or prove. The oldest evidence sits in a German cave, a figurine carved from mammoth ivory, 32,000 years old, a man's body crowned with a lion's head. No one has ever laid eyes on such a creature. It existed first in someone's imagination, and only then in the world. That was genuinely new under the sun, a brain that could picture what does not exist. Harari calls this leap the cognitive revolution, and it changed everything, because now humans could share the same dream. At first, the new language did something small and very human. It let us gossip. Who's lazy? Who's kind? Who cheated whom? Knowing your neighbor's business is how a little band of foragers stays glued together. But there is a ceiling. The leading research suggests a human can really keep track of only about 150 people. Past that, gossip alone can't hold a group together. And yet here we are, living in cities of millions, cooperating with total strangers, trusting people we will never once meet. How? Because we didn't only gossip about each other. We began telling stories about things that don't exist at all, and that turned out to be the most powerful thing our species ever learned to do. Here's what I mean. Think about a car company. Say, Peugeot. Where is it? Exactly. Not the factories. Those can be sold. Not the cars. They get scrapped. Not the workers. They come and go. Its founder, Armand Peugeot, died over a century ago. And yet Peugeot lives on, hiring, building, signing contracts. Peugeot is a story, a tale that a handful of lawyers wrote down, and that millions of us agreed to believe. And once we believe it, it becomes real enough to employ thousands and move billions. Now widen the lens. As Harari puts it, there are no gods, no nations, no money, no human rights, no laws, and no justice anywhere in the universe, except in the shared imagination of human beings. None of it is real, and that is exactly why it rules the world. That is the secret of our species, not strength, not intelligence, the power to invent a fiction and get a million strangers to trust it. Armed with that power, small bands of sapiens could plan, coordinate, and out-cooperate anything alive. And so they began to spread and to kill. Around 45,000 years ago, humans crossed open ocean to reach Australia, a land that had never seen us. It was full of giant beasts, 2-ton wombats, marsupial lions, flightless birds twice our height. Within a few thousand years, almost every one of them was gone. The same story repeated in the Americas. Wherever sapiens walked in, the giants walked out into extinction. We like to think ecological ruin is a modern sin, but long before farms, before cities, before a single machine, we were already the deadliest force life on this planet had ever produced. The gentle forager is a myth. We conquered the world as its most efficient killers. Then, about 10,000 years ago, in the Middle East, came the change every schoolbook calls humanity's great leap forward: farming. We stopped chasing our food and started growing it. Wheat, barley, goats. More food meant more people. More people meant villages, then towns, then everything that came after. But here, Harari makes his most provocative claim, and it's one plenty of historians push back on. So hear it as an argument, not a verdict. He says the agricultural revolution was, in his words, history's biggest fraud. Because for the average human being, life got worse. The forager ate a varied diet and worked a few hours a day. The early farmer ate mostly porridge, toiled from sunrise to dark, and bent his spine over a single field. New diseases leapt from crowded animals into crowded people. And for the first time, famine was one failed harvest away. More food did not buy a better life. It bought more mouths, chained to more work. So who actually won? Look at it from the plant's point of view. 10,000 years ago, wheat was nothing, just wild grass in one corner of the world. Today, it blankets the planet because it tricked an ambitious ape into clearing its rivals, watering it, guarding it, and carrying it to every continent. We did not domesticate wheat, Harari writes. It domesticated us. And once we started, we could not stop. Each little improvement, a bit more grain, a few more children, quietly raised the stakes. Turn back now, and people would starve. Every luxury hardened into a necessity you could no longer live without. Harari calls it the luxury trap. We reached for an easier life and locked ourselves into a harder one. And it's a pattern you already know, because you are living the modern version of it right now. But farming created a brand new problem. For the first time, thousands, then millions of strangers had to live packed together, and strangers do not naturally trust strangers. So we did the thing we do best. We told a bigger story. In 1776 BC, King Hammurabi carved his laws into stone and declared that the gods themselves had sorted people into ranks, superiors, commoners, and slaves, and that this order was eternal cosmic truth. In 1776 AD, an ocean and a world away, Thomas Jefferson wrote that all men are created equal. They cannot both be facts of nature, and Harari's point is that neither one is. Biology knows nothing of rank and nothing of rights. Both are stories, imagined orders we agreed to live inside. The only difference is which story a society chooses to believe. And every one of those stories does something uncomfortable. It decides who stands on top. Almost every large society has ranked its people, free above slave, one caste above another, one skin or one gender above the rest. And every single time, it insisted the ranking was natural, ordained, simply the way things are. It never was. There is no law of biology that says one person should kneel to another. These hierarchies were invented and then dressed up as destiny, so no one would think to question them. That is the shadow side of our gift. The same imagination that lets millions cooperate also lets a few convince the many that their chains are the natural order of the world. But those same fictions were about to do something no empire of muscle ever could. They began pulling the entire species together. For most of history, humanity was hopelessly divided. Thousands of separate tribes, languages, and gods, each convinced the others were barely human. And yet, slowly, steadily, the many worlds have been collapsing into one. Today, a person in Tokyo, in Lagos, in Lima spends the same kind of money, chases the same handful of brands, and lives under the same few ruling ideas. What pulled us together? 3 great fictions, bigger than any that came before. 3 stories so powerful they could bind total strangers across whole oceans. Money, empire, and religion. Start with the strangest of the 3, the one you use every single day and never once question. Pull a bill from your pocket. It's paper. You can't eat it, wear it, or build a shelter with it. On its own, it is worthless. And yet a farmer will hand you real food for it. A doctor will heal you for it. Strangers who share no language, no king, and no God will all take it, because each of them trusts that someone else will take it from them in turn. That's the trick. Money isn't gold, and it isn't paper. Harari calls it the most universal and most efficient system of mutual trust ever devised. A shared story that can turn anything into anything, land into loyalty, time into bread, a promise into a palace. A Christian and a Muslim who agreed on nothing else in the Middle Ages still trusted the very same gold coin. Money is the one story almost everyone on earth believes. Invisible, made up, and more powerful than any army. The second story was empire. We remember empires as villains, and yes, they conquered and they crushed. But Harari asks us to see the other half. Empires also melted thousands of little cultures into a few big ones. The language you speak, the laws you obey, the way you count the days. Most of it you inherited from some empire that once swallowed your ancestors' world. The third story reached higher still. Religion. A king can rule only the land he can see, but a god can rule everywhere at once, watching, judging, binding strangers who will never meet into a single moral family. Even a faith without gods, like Buddhism, offered a universal law that we suffer because we crave and find peace only when we stop grasping for more. Money, empire, faith. 3 fictions, each stitching the human world a little tighter. And then, 500 years ago, a 4th story rewired everything. The scientific revolution did not begin with an answer. It began with an admission. For most of history, every culture believed the important truths were already known, written in scripture, spoken by the ancients. To say, "I don't know," was not humility. It was failure. Then, about 500 years ago, Europeans began drawing maps with something shocking on them. Blank spaces. Whole regions simply marked, unknown, empty, waiting. It sounds like a small thing. It was an earthquake. Admitting that we do not know is precisely what sends us out to find out. Confess your ignorance, and suddenly the world is full of things to discover and things to seize. That single word, unknown, lit the fuse of the modern age. In 1492, a sailor named Columbus sailed straight into one of those blank spaces and blundered onto a continent no one in his world knew existed. Notice what happened next. The same ships that carried explorers also carried scientists, botanists, astronomers, mapmakers, and the knowledge they carried home came back riding alongside armies. Science and empire fell in love. Every voyage of discovery was also a voyage of conquest. Curiosity funded cannons. Cannons funded curiosity. Learn how the world truly works, and you can rule it. Rule it. And you can afford to learn still more. It was a machine that fed itself, spinning faster with every turn. But a machine needs fuel, and the fuel that powered the modern world was itself the wildest fiction of all. That fuel was credit, the strange act of believing in tomorrow. For most of history, wealth was a fixed pie. If I grew rich, you grew poor. Lending was suspicious, even shameful. Then came a brand new faith, the belief that the future will be bigger than the present. That belief let us borrow against a wealth that does not yet exist, invest it today, and actually grow the pie. Trust in growth, and astonishingly, growth appears. That is capitalism, not merely greed, but a story about the future so convincing that whole nations bet everything they had on it. Bolt that story onto science and empire. and you get an engine of almost unimaginable power. In just a few short centuries, it would remake the entire surface of the planet and every living thing on it. That remaking is called the Industrial Revolution, and at its heart was one simple, staggering discovery: how to turn raw energy into almost anything. Coal, then oil, then the atom. Humans learned to unlock oceans of power and pour it into machines that never tire. Food, cloth, steel, weapons, churned out in quantities no king in history could have dreamed of. But the same cold logic that ran the factory came for the farm. Living animals became units of production. Picture a single calf, taken from its mother, pinned in the dark so its flesh stays tender, one of billions. The descendants of the animals we first tamed became the most numerous creatures on Earth, and quite possibly the most miserable. Our power over nature had become total. What we had lost was any limit on what we would do with it. Industry did not just change what we made. It dissolved the oldest fictions of all, the family and the community. For thousands of years, your family and your village were your safety net, your bank, your hospital, your police. Slowly, the market and the state took their place. Today, strangers grow your food. Strangers guard your door. Strangers you will never meet keep the whole vast machine running. We gave up the tribe, and in exchange, we got something no era before us ever had: real, lasting peace. For the first time in history, war between the great powers has become almost unthinkable, and more people now die from overeating than from violence. Richer, safer, more powerful than any humans who ever lived, which raises the one question this whole long story has been circling from the start. After all of it, are we actually any happier? It's the question almost no history book dares to ask, and Harari's answer, again, his argument, not settled science, is deeply unsettling. Probably not. Because happiness, it turns out, does not come from the outside. Win the lottery, land the promotion, and the thrill fades within months. You drift back to feeling roughly the way you did before, suffer a real loss, and slowly, you climb back to the very same baseline. Our contentment is ruled less by our bank balance than by our own biochemistry, a kind of inner thermostat that keeps resetting to a set point, no matter what we achieve. Which means the medieval peasant and the modern billionaire may feel just about the same. All that conquest, all that invention, and the needle on human happiness has barely moved. We became gods of our environment. We never learned to master the one thing that decides whether any of it actually feels good. There was one tradition that saw this coming. Remember Buddhism, the faith that studied happiness the way others study the stars. Its founder landed on the answer 25 centuries before the neuroscience. We do not suffer because we lack things. We suffer because we crave. The wanting itself is the ache. Get the thing you wanted, and the mind simply reaches for the next thing. It's a quiet indictment of our whole triumphant story. We are the richest, safest, most powerful humans who have ever lived, and still restless, still grasping, still certain that the next upgrade will finally be enough. And now, having conquered the outside world, we've turned our tools on the very last frontier left, ourselves. For 4 billion years, one rule governed all of life. Everything alive was shaped by natural selection, slowly, blindly, over unimaginable ages. That rule is breaking. In our laboratories, we are learning to design life on purpose, to edit genes, to grow organs, to weave living tissue together with machines. Scientists have already read the DNA of the vanished Neanderthals. Some seriously discuss bringing them back. The animal that once ran from lions is now rewriting the code of life itself and eyeing its own. We may be among the last generations of Homo sapiens as we have always known it. What comes after us, we can barely imagine. The 70,000-year story that began with a lion carved in ivory is reaching its final, strangest page. The storyteller, preparing to rewrite the story. So look how far the frightened ape has come. It started as an animal of no significance, hiding in a corner of Africa. It learned to tell stories, and the stories built money and gods and nations and science and lifted it to mastery over every other living thing. Now it stands, in Harari's words, on the verge of becoming a god, holding the power to create and to destroy, answering to no one. And here is the final, haunting turn. With all of that power, we still do not know what we want. We wreak havoc on the world around us, chasing our own comfort, and never quite feeling satisfied. Harari leaves us on a single question, and I'll leave you on it too. Is there anything more dangerous than dissatisfied and irresponsible gods who don't know what they want? None of it, the money, the nations, the gods, was ever real. And that is exactly why it still rules your world. If this changed how you see the water you've been swimming in, stay with us. Next, we take on the book that asks where all this godlike power is finally taking us.